Hi, I'm Josh, and I'm going to show you the process of building this Zimmerman's high tunnel. So this is a 34-foot wide high tunnel by 65 feet long. We have 6-foot sidewalls and 5-foot arch spacing. Also, this high tunnel has the W truss, 5 rows of purlins, and metal hip and baseboards. We also have a double layer roof with the inflation fan and 24-inch intake and exhaust fans that run off a thermostat to keep the high tunnel cool. On the far side, I have a wooden end wall with 2 4x8 swinging doors. And up on this end, we have a polycarbonate end wall with the metal framing and 2 4x8 sliding doors that meet in the middle. So previously I made some videos constructing a more basic high tunnel kit from Zimmerman's. There's lots of useful information in those too, but this series is covering more of the options that Zimmerman's offer. So let's get started building. So now we are ready to install the polycarbonate on this end wall. There's lots of different methods of putting the polycarbonate on. I'm just going to show what I do. One option is to start on one end of the high tunnel and work your way across. The other method that I prefer is actually to start in the center and work your way out. It seems to me anyway it's easier to level the larger pieces and get them lined up and square and work your way out with the smaller ones. And also when you get to the end and you have to divide a piece or make a rip cut, you don't have to do it on one of these large pieces. It's easier to do a short piece. So I'm going to start in the center and work my way out. When you're working on these polycarbonate sheets, it's nice to have either some boards or some plywood underneath to keep everything stabilized. And if we need to make cuts, I like to mark where I need to cut using a chalk line. But there's other options. You can use a straight edge and a marker, whatever you have available. For cutting, I like to use a skill saw with a fine-tooth blade for plastic cutting or thin plywood. But you can also use a Sawzall with a metal blade in it, or even a jigsaw will work fine too with the metal blade. If you're not comfortable just following the line, you can clamp on a straight edge or a level to use as a guide for cutting it straight. So you want to leave the protective film on while you're cutting it so you don't damage the sheet, and wear eye protection. So this is the large H or double H channel for connecting two pieces. This is the smaller H or single H channel for finishing the outside. I found that a miter saw with an aluminum cutting blade in it works the best for cutting C-channel or this aluminum polycarbonate trim. If you're cutting off a shorter end, you want to make sure you hold it with something so that that doesn't go flying. After using the miter saw to make a cut, it doesn't take very much to get the burrs off of here. I just use a drill with a wire wheel in it. That's all there is to it. So above the sliding door header, we're going to be using 2 4x8 sheets of polycarbonate. And that makes a splice right across my fan opening. So what I did is I went ahead and installed these pieces of the large H channel to connect the two pieces. So this channel is going to be in the middle of your door header, and we're going to center this channel on the center line that was previously made on your door header. Then, if we start at the bottom, going off of that line, we're just going to take the level and line up all of our pieces so they're all straight and level. So we're not going to trim around this fan opening. When we put the fan on the outside of the wall, the flange on the fan will hold the polycarbonate in place. If your fan was going to mount from the inside, you would have to trim that opening with the small H channel as well. For those openings, you want to cut the opening in the polycarbonate sheet before you install it, because we want to make the cut down the middle of the square tubing, and that's difficult to make that cut once it's installed. So this lower piece of channel we're going to keep down 1.5 inches so that the flange on the fan fits properly. On the top here, I like to trim some of this channel off, just leaving the backing on. That way the backing will stick down, and when we attach the fan, it will get pinched and held in place, but it won't be in the way and make lumps for our fan to go around. We want to make this cut in line with the top of this frame, because we need all this space for the fan and the hood to mount properly. And when we put these pieces on, they can run up past, it doesn't matter, because when we cut the polycarbonate off later, we'll cut these to size also. So one method is to put all of the trim pieces on each sheet as you attach it. But I like to install the large H or vertical joiners with the polycarbonate sheets first. And then I'll come along and use larger or whole sections of the small H channel and slide those on later. So to put the polycarbonate in the right place for that, we're going to leave it hang down 5/8 of an inch below this channel, and that will accommodate for going into this groove, and also it'll leave the 1/8 inch expansion gap that we need. This notch here is 3/4 inch. If you leave an 1/8 inch for the expansion gap, that's 5/8 of an inch left that we want to hang this down, and when we slide this up onto it, it'll be in the proper position. Also, when installing this channel, the backing is a little bit taller than the front, so wherever you go around one of these large H pieces of trim here, I will notch that out a little bit so it'll fit all the way up tight. So our breathable tape is installed on the bottom, and now we're ready to peel off the protective coating on both sides and install this piece on the wall. As we take this off, we want to make sure we keep track of which side is the UV protected side. Some of it has writing on it, otherwise you can make a mark somewhere that's going to get covered up, just so you know which side to keep out after you peel off this coating. So you don't want it to be too windy when installing these panels, and it's good to have extra help if possible. So we have this piece held in place, and since I'm doing the trim later, I'm going to temporarily put a few screws in here to hold this while we continue on with the rest of the wall. Now for this piece, it's going to be held with the trim on the bottom, this piece of trim on the sides. The arch is going to be held once we finish that out. So it doesn't necessarily need much more for screws. The fan is also going to be holding it around that fan opening. So if we wanted to, we could add a screw in on this beam yet, but otherwise this piece is pretty much done for now. Once we have all the polycarbonate on the end wall, we'll come along and trim this top off. Until then, we'll put a temporary screw up here too. Once we come and finalize this, we'll take that screw out. And now we're ready for our next piece of channel over here. So this channel gets installed with the smooth side out using the longer 1.5 inch Tek screws. And it works best to pre-drill a 1/4 inch hole first, where you want to put your screws through. One method of installation is to put more Tek screws with the neoprene washers in the polycarbonate, and not to put any in this channel, but I prefer to attach the channel likewise. So once again, we'll keep it 5/8 inch up from the bottom here, and then we'll back it up 1/8 inch for the expansion, and then we can attach the bottom here. And sometimes it works best to leave these a little bit loose until you get the other sheet slid in, and then we'll go and tighten everything up. Now we'll make sure the top has the expansion gap there too. Double check to make sure it's level. And we'll attach one in the center here. The top will be fastened when we finish the arch. So because this is a door opening now, below this piece we're going to switch to the small H or single H channel. Now before we put up our next piece, we want to determine where we want the placement of your bottom small H channel. Normally I run it almost flush with the top of the baseboard or just below. So then we can determine where the polycarbonate needs to go and make a line. We will line up the bottom of the sheet with this mark that I made. And here's where you can see that you don't want to dig these down into the ground too much when you're putting on the baseboard. Otherwise it gets fairly challenging to put the screws in this channel down here. You want to make sure that we install this breathable tape on the bottom of each piece as we put it up. And this keeps bugs and things from getting in there and filling up your polycarbonate channels. Also, it lets the moisture drain out. So we have this piece at the right height. It's lined up real nice with the door post, and it's also sitting nice and level. So now we're ready to start attaching it. So we'll start with the 1.5 inch Tek screws with the neoprene washers and attach the polycarbonate to these two horizontals. And we'll space these at 1 foot, 2 foot, and 3 foot. You want to be careful tightening these screws just so that the washer makes good contact, but we don't want to crush the polycarbonate. So again, I'm going to temporarily fasten a few spots along the edges because it's a little breezy today, and I'm going to be doing the outer trim later. So we're ready for another piece of channel. We just want to make sure we put it that 5/8 inch up again. And then we're going to mark where we want to drill our holes. And this only has to be attached on the baseboard and these two horizontals. It'll get attached to the arch when we finish it up there. So we want to make sure that we drill right through the center of this piece so that we end up putting the Tek screw through that groove in the middle. Once again, we'll leave these a little bit loose so that the other piece slides in better. Now we can keep installing double H channel and pieces of polycarbonate until we get to the outside edge. We want to make sure we keep stepping the polycarbonate lengths down using the shortest piece that fills the opening. So this doorway I'm going to install at a later date. So at this time we're going to cover over it and go on by. The door mounts from the outside, and the door frame is going to be the trim for this opening. So now we're ready for the last small piece of polycarbonate on this side of the wall. We want to leave room for the small H channel that's going on here, and I like to run that past the hip and baseboards to close up that opening. So I have marked where I want my H channel to be and how far out I want the polycarbonate. I'll take that measurement and we'll be ready to cut that piece. Or if you want, you could hold the piece up and mark it in place. And then we'll install this piece of trim to keep everything in place. So we have our piece of small H channel cut now, and we're going to attach this using the shorter 3/4 inch Tex screws, spaced about every foot. So now we can go back to the center of the wall where we started and finish the other half. At this point, we are ready to trim off the polycarbonate level or flush with the top of the arch. We'll also be cutting the double H channel as we go past. A reciprocating saw or a sawzall with a metal cutoff blade usually works best for this, if you can do it carefully. So we want this polycarbonate to come down the arch and meet up with this corner over here. You want to be careful not to scrape up your arch too badly when we're cutting this. The tighter you hold the sawzall against the polycarbonate, the better it's going to cut. So now we're going to attach the polycarbonate to the arch. And first we're going to go along and remove the temporary screws that we put in. And now we're going to use the aluminum foil tape and seal the ends or the tops of the polycarbonate sheets. So if we want to, if there's any burrs from cutting it, we can scrape those off a little bit. We just don't want to tear the tape as we're putting it on. And as you're making corners and things, it does tend to get a little wrinkly. That's not the worst problem. We just want to make sure that it's sealed well. In the sharp ends, it's easier to make shorter pieces so that we can get it installed properly. We just want to make sure it's on both sides, sealing the end well. That's what's going to help your polycarbonate to insulate properly so that the air can't get through these channels or flutes. And we can go right over these H channels, and that's fine. It does stick pretty well, so you want to make sure it's where it belongs before you press it on. And this will get covered up, so it doesn't necessarily have to be real pretty. Some of these channels can be sharp from cutting them, so you do have to be careful. And we'll just continue putting this on all the way to the other side. So there's several different options for trim or channel to finish the top of the polycarbonate. Right now, Zimmermann's is going with the simple method of attaching a piece of C-channel to the face of the arch, which holds the polycarbonate in place. So it works best to pre-drill these channels where you're going to put the tech screws through using a 1/4-inch drill bit. And we want to put a tech screw in about every 8 inches. The main purpose of this channel is just to pinch the polycarbonate tight against the arch. We want to use the 1.5-inch tech screws for installing this channel. So it works best if you start in the peak and work your way down to each side. That way you don't have to try to make that bend at the peak of the arch. Then, once we have this installed, we can go along and put on our regular C-channel that holds the roof plastic up on top. This is going to be on here also. Your roof plastic will be attached here like usual, and then you will bring the tail or the skirt of the roof plastic and tuck it into this one. That way it'll seal out any moisture and things from getting behind your polycarbonate. So when making the relief cuts for the bottoms of the arches as you come around, it doesn't take very much, just a little bit, and then we can take and bend those to fit the arch. So kind of like that, it'll follow the arch down, and then we can cut this off and attach it. So if you start at the peak and work our way down, the only place you should have to make any of these cuts is down at the bottom of the arch. When you're done, it should look something like this. Now we're going to install the small H channel, or outside trim, that goes along the bottom of the polycarbonate sheets and doorway. So we'll start with removing the temporary screws that we put in, and we want to make sure the bottom screws on the large H channels are a little bit loose too, so that we can tuck the small H channel up behind. So I'm going to start with installing the bottom H channel on this side. So we're going to take a piece, and I like to miter or angle the corners. It looks nicer that way, but straight cuts work too. And you can use a Sawzall or different cutting options for that too. We want to make sure there's no burrs on here so that it slides on good, and so that you don't end up getting cut while you're working on it. And then we'll go ahead and mark the other notches that we need to make. So on the mitered corner, we just want to leave a little bit of a lip on the edge, so the other piece has the expansion gap when you meet it up in the corner. And this doesn't necessarily have to be completely tight. A little bit of drainage is okay in that joint. And now, because the back of the H channel is a little bit taller than the front, we're going to notch out where these large H channels come down and they meet. So we can see the back of the large H channel. through the polycarbonate, and we just kind of make a little bit of a mark on each edge. And then we will trim a little bit out so that this H-channel fits up tight against this one. And since we kept this 5/8 inch up from the bottom of the polycarbonate, when we push this up tight, that's going to leave the proper expansion gap between your small H-channel and polycarbonate. So we're going to find the marks that we made, and we're just going to trim the back of this H-channel down so that it's flush or below the front of the small H-channel. And what works best for that is to make some cuts. Not too deep, but just far enough. And then we can take and snap these out. There's other methods of cutting this too. This is using the simplest tools anyway. Then make sure everything is lined up good. Straighten anything if needed. We can file it a little bit. We just want to make sure your polycarbonate slides in there good. And this is behind your baseboard, so you don't see this anyway. And now these should fit up nice and tight against these channels. And if we hold these up tight, we should have that proper 1/8 inch expansion gap between the bottom of the polycarbonate and the H-channel. So we'll just hold this up tight, and then we'll install this using the 1.5" Tek screws about every foot. And if we need to, if the dirt's too high, we can adjust that a little bit. So this is the last piece for that corner of the wall. We have this notched out. When it's done, it should look something like that. Also, we're going to cut this outside corner edge off in the back, about 1/4 inch. And that's going to allow room for this channel to fit against this back lip. So when taking measurements for a mitered corner, we want to measure from the bottom of the shoulder right here. And then we're going to make our mark at the same place, the bottom of the shoulder, on the piece that we're going to cut. And then we're going to make our angle corner across the mark like this. So we'll just slide this under and up to that piece of H-channel. And then we can attach this. So on this top piece, we have to notch the back of the channel to accommodate for this large H-channel up here. That should slide up. And fit like that. If you wanted to, you could notch this out here too, or you can just lap it like that. Once we get this installed, this door frame will be trimmed out.